Hello and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about this. Please like and subscribe to keep these videos coming at you, and hit that little bell notification so that you don't miss any of my videos. I have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I think I have 10 orchid plants. Yeah? Most of them I have had for over a year now. Last year I had a little bit of an orchid craze and I bought 9 of the 10 all at the same time. At midsummer around here, there are a lot of orchids that are just kind of on sale at all the stores because they've lost their blooms. So this beautiful little orchid here was one of those purchases. When I bought her, she did not have any flowers on her, and now look at her. She's beautiful. Okay, she doesn't have a lot of flowers on her, but she was a little bit of a late bloomer, and I think that's why. I'm going to include some pictures right now of some orchids that I've had this year, all of which didn't have flowers when I bought them. But I'm going to include in these instructions some simple tips to help to get your orchids to rebloom and to help them to thrive so that they want to rebloom. The first thing that I wanted to mention when it comes to orchid care is where you want to keep your orchids. I keep my orchids in my laundry room for the most part, except when they're blooming. So orchids like to have bright but not direct sunlight, so you want to have them close to a window, but not where the sun is going to shine directly on them. How I keep my orchids happy is I will put them right up next to a window, but we have somewhat see-through blinds and I will just close those so that they get very bright but indirect sunlight that way. Now, orchids love to be in a humid environment, but your house doesn't have to be very humid in order for orchids to not only survive but also thrive. The trick to keeping them in an environment that is not too humid is just to water them very often. And how you can tell if they need watering is their roots will become somewhat silvery. And it's actually very satisfying because when they become silvery like that, you can just put a little bit of water on them and it's like a magic trick. They immediately turn green because they soak it all up. Another thing that is essential when it comes to orchid care is fertilizer. We all need a little bit of nutrition in our lives, and orchids are not the exception to that rule. They cannot live on water and air alone. They need a little bit of help with fertilizer. The fertilizer I use is this Miracle-Gro orchid food, and I've been using this since I got all of my orchids. I've still got most of it. So the orchid food that I bought for them last year cost $4.68 at Lowe's. That's where I got it. So I follow the instructions on the orchid food. It has 2 different scoops, and the smaller scoop is what you need to use for a gallon of water. The smaller scoop, you just take 1 little scoop of fertilizer, put it in the water, fill it up for the whole gallon, and every week I only have to use about a gallon of water to water all of my orchids. So we will take the orchids and we will keep them in their pots when we water them and just fill it up to the brim. As you can see here, you can see a little bit of the water coming up through the medium, and you will just leave the orchids for about 15 minutes. The fertilizer needs to be added to the water beforehand if you're going to fertilize them. You only need to fertilize the orchids once every month, so that is not something that needs to be done every time or you will burn the roots on the orchids. I water my orchids 1 time a week. You may need to do so more or less depending on the environment of your house or where you're keeping the orchids, because if it is more humid, then you will probably need to water them less. If it is less humid, you will probably need to water them more. Now, sometimes when you're watering the orchids, a little bit of water will get caught on the leaves. And the way to fix this is you just take a little paper towel and fold it up and put it in the crevices of the leaves. The reason we do this is because water left on the leaves will often lead to rot. And I've lost many orchids this way. Probably 5 of my orchids I've lost this way because I left water on the leaves and I did not soak it up. And since my house is not extremely well ventilated, the water sat on the leaves for too long and began to rot them. And it eventually got to the very core of the orchid and killed it. So this is actually something that is very, very important. Part of the reason why I had not cleaned it up was I had read on a few Reddit pages that wasn't important because orchids were in the rainforest and therefore they were wet all the time and they were fine in the rainforest. However, when orchids are in the rainforest, they are up high in trees and they get so much ventilation up there that there's not a chance for the water to sit there for an extended period of time and rot the leaves because the water is just constantly falling and then evaporating and falling again in the rainforest. Whereas in my house, it's just sitting on the leaves for hours and hours doing nothing but rotting the leaves. Okay, now to the juicy part. How do we get our orchids to bloom? How did I get this orchid and these orchids to bloom? So an orchid in the wild would begin to bloom as the seasons change, as it gets colder in the environment. What an orchid needs to be able to bloom is to be healthy and happy, first of all, and second of all, it needs to get cold. So what I do is I keep my orchids in my laundry room. My laundry room has neither heating nor cooling. It doesn't get too hot in there in the summer, but it does get very cold in there in the winter. It gets probably 50 degrees in there in the winter, and about that range is what you're going to want for your orchids. You're going to want a temperature drop. Not too cold, because we're not talking like freezing temperatures because that will kill it. But we're talking about the temperature, say if you left your orchid in the garage, okay? It's not completely exposed to the elements, but it is getting a temperature drop. And that will stimulate the orchid to think, oh, okay, the seasons are changing, it is time to develop new buds, it is time to bloom. So I left my orchids in our laundry room when the seasons changed. Mind you, you have to keep them in a spot where they still have light because again, you can't just put them in a dark closet where it's cold or a dark garage where it's cold and think that they'll do great. They still need light, so if your garage has a window, great, or if you have a room like mine in the house that doesn't have heating or cooling, maybe that would work. Also, it is a waiting game because as you can tell, this orchid is blooming and it is September. This orchid was in our laundry room when the seasons changed about this time last year, and that is how long it took for her to respond to the change of temperature and to grow her stalk and to bloom. My other flowers mostly bloomed in the late spring or mid-summer, so it was a transition time of about 6 months or so from the time that they registered it was cold to the time that they grew their stalks and their flower buds and bloomed. So it's not an overnight thing, but it really is a wonderful feeling to be able to see that you did that you took care of this beautiful plant, and that because you took such good care of it, it is happy enough to make beautiful flowers to decorate your space with. Here where I live, it's pretty humid year round, and so I have had an issue a little bit with mushrooms. I got some bad soil in a different plant that I brought into the house and it bloomed mushrooms, and so the mushrooms got into my orchid medium, and I've had to change 3 of the orchid mediums since that bad soil got in my house because it started growing mushrooms. So if something like that happens, you may need to change the medium, and how you do that is you'll take a cookie sheet, and I like to put some tinfoil on it so it's easier to clean up. Gently hold the base of the orchid plant, hold it sideways, and pull the pot off of the plant. Sometimes the orchids will grow through the holes in the pot, in which case you will have to cut those growths off, unfortunately, otherwise you're not going to be able to take it out of the pot. Once you have it out, then you're going to take it to the sink and gently rinse the roots to clean them off. Make sure that you get anything that you don't want on the roots off. In my case, these are mushroom spores. Then we will wash the pot and gently replace the orchid in the pot and pouring the medium around the roots. Once we have poured enough medium to seemingly fill the pot, we will gently shake it to let it settle, and then we will repeat the process of filling the pot with medium, shaking it, filling it with medium, shaking it, until the pot is full enough and we can see on all sides of the pot that there are not any gaping holes that are going to settle later on. And you have now repotted your orchid. Something to help the orchid transition is to soak it the night before. I did not do this with mine since they had mushrooms and I wasn't trying to awaken the beast. Also, while you have the orchid out of the pot, that's a good time to check the roots and make sure that none of them have died. And if they have died, it's a good time to get some clean scissors, freshly washed, and chop those off. Hey, post-production Emma here. I wanted to let you guys know how to tell what is dead and what is not root-wise. Green and yellow does not mean alive and dead when it comes to these roots. So the yellow ones are just not making chlorophyll, whereas the green ones do have chlorophyll because they are touching the sun, therefore they're making energy from the sun for the orchid. You can really feel the difference when something is alive or dead on an orchid root. The green and yellow roots that are alive are going to be very firm to the touch. They have a nice give to them. However, the dead roots, which on this even some portions will just be dead. This is very squishy, but here at the end, this is very firm. So this segment of root is still alive. This middle segment is mostly dead, but we're going to leave it because the end of the root is still alive here. This, however, is a completely dead end right there. How we're going to cut that is we're going to cut just before it ends, right there. We don't want to cut into the green because that will break the healthy part of it, and that will open up the orchid to disease if we do that. We're really just trying to reduce any pest problems, or even, you know, like I had problems with some fungi. We don't really want fungi in our orchids, so removing things that are dead on the orchid will help prevent that kind of thing. See, this here is also dead, so we cut that off. If you can still feel that it's kind of bulky when you touch it, that's alive, and if it's not, then it's dead. I have heard from so many people that orchids are so difficult to take care of, and I really just wanted to make a short and simple video to help explain how to care for an orchid and how it can be done in just a few simple and easy steps. I hope that if you guys have any orchids that this helps you, or if you were thinking of getting some orchids, that this helps you too. If you guys would like any more orchid related videos, please leave a comment down below and let me know the topic that you're interested in seeing. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and hit that bell notification. I am so appreciative of you watching my video today, and I hope that you have a great day. Bye!